Every meeting of the roundtable that I've ever attended was very important in one way or another. Today will probably be as important as any, I think, that it's held in my memory or to my knowledge. As I say, it will represents to me the fruition, the culmination of a lot of research, a lot of good debate, a lot of fruitful discussion in which each of you has participated, and many of your predecessors. I took a look back at past agendas just on the subject of teacher quality, which is a principal topic with which we'll deal today, and can count at least 6 sessions with national and international experts, people like Arthur Levine and Ariel Rosman and Joel Klein and others, who have come to help us think through this central topic in our hopes of improving performance in the Indiana education system on the subject of early access to college, or accelerated progress to post-secondary education. We've had at least 3 sessions. And so nothing that will be discussed here today is new in any material respect, but it is so incredibly exciting to me that we're here, I hope, on the brink of a surge forward for positive reform and change in Indiana education. And I just want to start by thanking everyone here, whatever your viewpoint on the specific questions, for the input that you've given and for the care and concern you've shown just by participating in the roundtable or attending its meetings and being heard. We will not be seeking today a blanket endorsement of the many policies that the superintendent and I and legislative leaders like Senator Cruz, Representative Benning plan to offer in this year's General Assembly, but we will ask you to consider endorsing those that deal with teacher quality and early access to college, the 2 topics I mentioned earlier. So, that said, I'll lateral the ball to Superintendent Bennett, who's going to lead us through a presentation prior to the open discussion to follow.
I want to start, and we have a PowerPoint, and I will try to be concise. We will try to move through this without being too quick, but I want to be certain we leave plenty of time for discussion and questions. And I think the first slide says it all. I would ask you to take a look at that first slide and think very seriously about those 3 words underneath Indiana's 2011 education agenda. Go back again. I'm not going to use sharp rhetoric like putting students first and not adults. We're not going to get into that. What we're going to talk about today is a legislative agenda that first and foremost thinks about our children. Every decision we make, every fiscal decision we make as it applies to education, every education policy decision we make will be run through the lens of what is best for the children of our state. What prepares them, what makes them college and career ready, what gives them the opportunity to be competitive across the nation and around the world. So everything we talk about today, I would ask that you think about through that lens, because that will be the lens we take to the General Assembly in the days, weeks, and months to come. And we look forward to working with our legislature as we continue that quest. I want to start with a slide that refers to the many challenges we confront in Indiana education. We put this slide together to kind of show the many issues that confront Indiana education in our quest to give our children the best they deserve. And I think when you look at this slide, you see many challenges. In many instances, you see many things that may upset you, may concern you. And in many instances, these challenges provide us opportunities. And I would ask that you think for a moment about the issue of how do we address these things. And if we took conventional wisdom, if we took the way we've always done it across the country in education, we pick out an issue, we hang our hats on it, and we say, let's go pursue that. That's going to make education better. And we all know that when we do that, we are really not systemically changing our education system in this state. We're not changing structures. So I would ask, as you look at this slide of challenges, and you see them all. Some of those are things like 75% non-wavered graduation rate, to HR practices that we have in our schools. I ask that you think about this slide as calling for the need for comprehensive education reform in the state of Indiana. It is not talking about doing one-offs one at a time. We will be talking about a very bold, a very intense, and a very student-centered legislative agenda that will change the structure of education comprehensively. So we'll no longer have those discussions, did the one-off work. So just wanted to frame the discussion that we have a comprehensive problem. We don't want to have single solutions. There is no silver bullet. This will require a comprehensive set of solutions. The next slide you see are really what I would refer to as the 3 pillars for systemic change. How are we going to address those challenges? How are we going to address those in a comprehensive nature? And I think the first pillar you see there really hits one of the hot national topics that virtually every state in the country is having. How do we identify and reward our great teachers and our great principals? How do we give school leadership flexibility to promote excellence? So the first pillar is identifying and rewarding great teachers and principals. The second pillar hits where I think we will end up. And it's an overarching concept. Indiana is entering into an era of intense accountability for schools, school corporations, and its professionals. And if you're going to have a high accountability climate, you have to give the folks who are operating in that climate the flexibility and the authority they need to operate. A few weeks ago, I got an email from a pretty astute superintendent who said, I am all in on high accountability. But I ask for flexibility in addressing that. And the next comment is one I think frames this middle pillar very well. He said, Tony, accountability without authority is really punishment. And he said, give me the authority to meet the standards of accountability we should be setting in this state for our schools. And so I think the idea of bringing success to failing schools, taking our great schools and making them better, taking our good schools and making them great, taking our mediocre schools to the next level, and really taking our failing schools and getting them out of that failing status is going to take flexibility if we're going to hold folks accountable to those expectations. And the last pillar, high quality options for all families. High quality options for all families. Offer equal educational opportunities to all children. Give parents a voice. Give parents a choice. Allow us to enter into an era where we acknowledge one size doesn't fit all, where we tailor the educational opportunity for the child to the educational need of the student. A critical thought is that if we're going to make this a students first agenda, we have to agree to tailor the opportunities for our children to their needs. So those are the 3 pillars. That's how we give structure, that's how we give focus to education reform and our agenda. We've made progress on these things so far. And I don't want to read these to you, but I just ask you take a look at under identify and reward great teachers and principals. Obviously, Indiana went through intense licensing, teacher certification reform that we call REPA. In many instances, states across the country are now looking at our licensing certification reform because we will be the first state in the country to base teacher education standards on the outcomes we expect to get for our children. It gives far more flexibility in terms of mid-career changers. It offers flexibility for our existing teachers as they recertify their licenses. So we are now in an era where we are giving flexibility to this issue of teacher quality. We are trying to take the measures we need to take to attract the brightest and the best. Along these same lines, we're arming our teachers with a different set of resources. We changed the definition of a textbook to include a laptop computer. We have supported the one-to-one laptop initiative and new tech. And I appreciate the work of the General Assembly. I appreciate the vision of the governor in opening up the line for new tech. And finally, the General Assembly did provide qualified immunity for teachers who use reasonable disciplinary measures to maintain classroom discipline. So we've done many things for our teachers. It's now time that we take that most noble profession in our state and we recognize it, we reward it, and we treat them as the professionals they went into this vocation to be. Under that second pillar of accountability and flexibility, we have A through F grading. We will be working through the metrics. The State Board has agreed to move to that. We have also agreed to move toward separating AYP from Public Law 221 under No Child Left Behind. We have taken those first steps under Public Law 221 to intervene with our persistently low achieving schools. And I want to say we're seeing a broad range of response. We've seen folks in Fort Wayne do some very interesting and innovative things with their lead schools. We've seen Marion step out and come to the state board meeting with community, teacher association, administration, the mayor, and say we're going to make our schools good again. So we've seen some very interesting things happen as we've intervened. We've introduced what we believe, and we've actually presented on here at the roundtable, what I think is the game changer in Indiana education will be Indiana's growth model. I heard Secretary Duncan last week speak about every child being entitled to a year's growth in a year of academic work. And that's what we should be striving for. And we now are positioned here very uniquely in this state because of the work of the growth model to begin to look at that, to begin to offer that transparent view. We've supported efforts to recruit transformational teachers and leaders. Again, we talk about the line item for new tech, and part of that was the Woodrow Wilson program. We have worked closely with Marion University in a transformational leadership academy. So we are, again, looking for that flexibility to bring different types of professionals to Indiana's schools. General Assembly closed loopholes, allowing dangerous teachers to continue teaching despite criminal charges. We have early reading legislation, and I want to talk about that in a few minutes, as well as a couple of work groups that are very important. And we focused on course credit being proficiency versus seat time, another area of flexibility for Indiana schools. As we look at the third pillar, we've made progress. We have a small scholarship tax credit. We've piloted virtual charters. We have online AP courses. And the General Assembly did took a tremendous step in terms of offering students to pursue their options among Indiana's public schools by allowing really public school choice. We have seen school corporations literally advertise for students. Billboards, come to Taylor New Tech is one. And it has generated an opportunity for children like we've never seen. And the General Assembly's commitment to not capping our charters statewide. So where do we go? We've made some progress in these areas, and I would tell you that the last thing we can do is stop. There is a small window of opportunity in this nation. Education is the one bipartisan place that the ship always seems to stop, and we need to capitalize on that here. So today isn't the day to say, hey, we've made some pretty good progress, we're proud of it, we need to stop. Frankly, what we need to do is put our foot on the accelerator and move faster. Our kids are screaming for it, our state's screaming for it, and I think the nation is screaming for an example of a state that knows how to get this done. So what are our proposals? As we go through these, we want to offer local leaders the freedom to make improvements necessary to better bolster student achievement while holding them accountable for school performance. 2, promote excellence by identifying and rewarding great teachers and great principals based on their performance rather than degrees and seniority. Ladies and gentlemen, we have literally a statement in Indiana statute that says we have to build our salary schedules on years of experience and degrees held, which research tells us have little to no bearing on teacher quality or student performance. So we have an opportunity to address a structural issue to recognize and reward our brightest, our best, our highest performers, and differentiate them. And I think it's critical we address that issue. We should require fair, reliable annual evaluations which differentiate great teachers and principals and support those who need improvement. Include student achievement data, such as growth, as a significant portion of our teacher evaluations. If our goal is to produce college and career-ready individuals, if our goal, as Secretary Duncan has said time and time again, is to drive a year's growth and a year's of instruction, and that's our core mission, we should be in the business of measuring that. Allow local leaders to make HR decisions based on performance to support student learning. Again, let's walk away from an antiquated system that requires school leadership to make decisions based solely on seniority. It's no longer necessary. The stakes are too high. We must put and keep our best teachers in Indiana classrooms. Tie tenure to effectiveness in the classroom, as opposed to tying tenure to seniority. Focus collective bargaining agreements between school corporation and teachers unions on salaries and wage-related benefits, including innovative ways to recognize performance through compensation. So again, provide the opportunities. You know, I said this yesterday to the Budget Committee. Our statute and its statement that we build salary schedules based on years of experience and degrees held, I think that might be the greatest obstacle to local control. Why don't we let local school communities work with their teachers and develop salary structures that allow a Wendy Robinson or a Vince Bertram to go get the types of teachers they need and pay them what they're worth. In an era where we need great minority teachers in front of Indiana's children, let's give our local school leadership the opportunity to go out and recruit those individuals. This next slide, people ask all the time, let's talk about evidence, let's talk about research. Well, let's talk a little bit about it. There is no evidence that tells us otherwise. There is nothing more important we can do in schools. There is no more important school-based reform, no more important school-based factor than great teachers and great leaders. Okay? And you have 4 comments. One from the Brookings Institute that talks about the effect of a top quartile teacher over 4 years. It essentially closes our achievement gap. The second discusses how great principals interface with great teachers. They are force multipliers of great teachers, and frankly, they can take a good staff and a lousy principal can make them pretty bad in a hurry. So we must acknowledge that this is about the ultimate local. It's about great teachers and great principals in Indiana schools. And I think the last statement says it all. I've been on the road quite a bit recently. I've heard, what do we do about class size? What do we do about parental involvement? What do we do about all these issues? That last statement by Daniel Fallon says it best. A teacher's influence on student achievement is 20 times greater than any other variable, including class size and poverty. That doesn't sum it up, folks. Nothing does. We need to begin to put our money, put our courage, put our efforts where our mouth is, and we need to make sure that we recognize, identify, recruit, retain, and reward our best teachers and principals. And how do we do that? It requires annual evaluations. It requires rigorous, data-driven, and I want to say data-driven in terms of one of multiple metrics. You know, the myth is that we're looking to hang all teachers' evaluations on one issue and one issue only, which is how their students perform. It's one of multiple metrics. Okay? But what we know about current evaluations, and we can just slide through all these because I want to hit 3 of these. One, our current evaluation systems, and you'll see it under the first bullet point, they don't differentiate great teachers from teachers who aren't so great, from teachers who, frankly, are poor. Okay? According to a survey we did out of the DOE in 2009, only 9% of Indiana school corporations use evaluation tools that can distinguish highly effective teachers from effective teachers. Think about that. Only 9% of our school corporations can truly differentiate greatness from those who aren't so great. Go down a couple bullets. They don't provide meaningful feedback to help teachers improve instructional practices. We hear from teachers, our evaluations don't mean anything. It's a perfunctory exercise. Okay? In some instances, I've spoken to principals who said they were never trained on how to evaluate. And go to the last bullet point. We talk about having a seniority-based HR system in this state for education. Well, we don't use data to even inform our decisions. We have had less than 0.1% of tenured teachers dismissed for performance annually because we haven't done the evaluation. So many times we talk about this being anti-teacher. In many instances, in most instances, it's about the fact that we have to evaluate to get the job done. And we haven't had an evaluation system and structure and tools in place to do this in an informed manner. And we're no different than the national landscape. If you use a meets, does not meet evaluation system, of what we refer to as a binary evaluation system nationally, 99% of the teachers are ranked effective. 99% are said to meet expectations. Indiana's no different. We are a little worse when you get to multi-categorical evaluations, those that have 3 or 4 ratings. In those, nationally, 94% of the teachers are ranked effective or highly effective using a multi-categorical ranking system. In Indiana, 99% of the teachers are ranked effective or highly effective in a multi-categorical ranking. Again, to dispel a myth, there are people out there saying Tony Bennett wants 25, we want 4 categories and 25% in each category. No, we want integrity in evaluations. I don't mean integrity in terms of questioning those doing it. We want integrity in the ability to make informed decisions regarding the performance of teachers. This isn't about making sure we have equal distribution. This is making sure that the folks in our classroom are being appropriately evaluated. This next slide, I think, tells us a great deal about what teachers think. This is a slide that was funded by the Gates Foundation, performed through Scholastic. It was 40,000 teachers nationally. And I would ask you to pay attention to the top 2 bars. The 2 that have overwhelming, very accurate marks. And what this did, this asked teachers, what are the right ways to evaluate teachers? What has the most validity? The teachers said the most valid way to evaluate us is student engagement. Okay? And I think we all know that. But take a look at number 2, and this should give us great hope in what we're doing with the growth model. These 40,000 teachers, 55% of them said that the very accurate way of evaluating their performance was student growth year over year. And Indiana has a growth model. We now have the ability to address many of these issues. As you go down and look, I think it's somewhat interesting. The principal observation and review was 22%, very accurate. 70% somewhat accurate compared to student growth being at 97% and student engagement being 98% combined. So again, Indiana teachers are saying, or not Indiana teachers, our teachers nationally are saying student growth and student engagement are good ways, good measures to use in a multiple measured system. So let's move to accountability and flexibility. Hold all schools accountable for achieving results. We must have high accountability. Free school administrators from outdated statutes and regulations and contract restrictions. Allow time for chronically failing schools to improve, but expect results based on rigorous annual performance goals. Free school leaders in our lowest performing schools from restrictions that prevent schools from making staff decisions in the best interests of students. Provides the state all necessary tools to intervene when local leadership has failed to offer a quality education to its children. Give local school communities the autonomy and freedom to sustain success in a post-intervention phase. After we have intervened, let's make sure communities can sustain that success. And finally, if parents believe that the school isn't working, allow there to be a parent trigger. Give parents a voice to say, we want to change the school. This is an opportunity to answer that superintendent that said, if you're going to hold me accountable in an A through F, a rigorous accountability system, let me have the tools to answer the bell. And if you go back to our challenges slide, it shows us that in Public Law 221, there are 24,826 students that are in those schools that are chronically underperforming. So we have the most intense obligation to those children. But we should also make sure all of Indiana's children are in schools that are focusing on continuous school improvement. The last pillar, high quality options for all families. We must give all students, regardless of their zip code, regardless of how much money their parents make, regardless of their race, opportunities to attend an excellent school. Ensure that state education dollars follow the needs of students so that parents can select the best possible education options for their children. Allow students to graduate early and offer them a college scholarship equal to the amount the state would have spent on the last year of high school. Allow more charter authorizers, and with that, ratchet up accountability so that we hold them all accountable for student performance. Again, we have to remember, accountability will be for not only Indiana's traditional publics, but we will have letter grades for charters. We will have letter grades for private schools that participate in the state's assessment system. So everyone will receive that transparent, very visible assessment of school performance. Help charters access safe and appropriate public facilities. Expand access to virtual charter schools to reach underserved students and fill gaps in the traditional system. And simplify and strengthen the charter conversion process so that Indiana's public school corporations can more easily transform their schools as they see fit. I want to talk just for a moment about the opportunity to graduate from high school early. This is part of a study we did when high school students were asked whether they would consider graduating from high school early if the state would provide a scholarship for college. 70% of freshmen and 73% of seniors said they would prefer that. When asked if they could graduate early but still participate in high school activities, the support jumped to 77% in both groups of students surveyed. That doesn't surprise anyone. Okay, so a very keen interest on this issue. So folks, let me jump back to the first slide about Indiana. I want you to pull it up, Alex. Go back to that first slide about challenges. Go back to that second slide about how we address it systematically. and think about all the steps in between. This must be comprehensive education reform, and it must start, end, and have every step along the way focused on Indiana's students and giving students and families the opportunities they need to succeed. With that, let's open it up to questions.